I'm Queen V.
And I'm Dr. E. Welcome to Audacity to Believe. Hey, Queen V, we're going to be talking about something super important, a piece of history that we should never ever let go, and that is the Harlem Renaissance. Can you please talk about what that is for those that may not ever heard of it or may have forgotten about it?
Oh, absolutely, Dr. E. The Harlem Renaissance actually occurred in the 1920s. And it was in Harlem, New York, which to this day is really a mecca for African American artists of all type. But it started with the Harlem Renaissance, which happened in the 1920s. And the context of it is that post Reconstruction, of course, just steps from slavery, actually, African Americans were flooding out of the South to the North. Of course, we know all the major cities, Chicago, Baltimore, New Jersey, but certainly New York City was a mecca. And what happened is that the creative culture of Harlem just exploded to the point that so many amazing, phenomenal icons that we recognize today were birthed during the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes, Norzell Hurston, Louis Armstrong, there were so many, Dizzy Gillespie, so many people were birthed and had a lot of their nurturing from the Harlem Renaissance.
Okay, so you speak of so many different wonderful, brilliant people of our past. Let's talk a little bit about Langston Hughes. I remember reading about him back in college, and I was so happy to read about this man. Can you talk a little bit about Langston?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Langston Hughes is known still to this day in so many ways as one of the premier poets of the Harlem Renaissance and of African American culture still today. And I love one of his quotes that comes from his book, The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain. And he went on to say, this was their mindset. We younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, it doesn't matter. We know we are beautiful and ugly too. What he was saying is that we know that we encompass the totality of the human experience. And so all of the artists of that day that were involved in the Harlem Renaissance were just fever pitch hot, Dr. E, over creating things that showcased, highlighted, and identified with African American culture.
Well, it's interesting. There are so many people back during that era where they locked arms and they worked collaboratively to ensure that each of them had some degree of success. Let's talk about how collaboration is so important and critical in moving forward or realizing some of our dreams.
Absolutely. Like you, I believe that the genesis and the real jewel of what they created was through collaboration, cooperation, and celebration. They learned how to work together and not compete so much as lock arms and come in and strengthen each other. Because, of course, even though they were in this cultural mecca, they were still not without racism. There was still, racism was rampant, discrimination was rampant, all of the isms, the sexism, everything else. But they learned that through their collaboration, cooperation, and celebration, that they were stronger together.
Well, let me ask you this. There's a piece that we discussed a little bit earlier before the broadcast, and that's writing truth without fear or favor. Let's talk about that. Writing is writing truth without fear or favor. What does that mean?
That means that you are speaking the truth, period.
Okay.
And, it was so powerful because at that time they knew that, they were not many years from African Americans being lynched for, muttering something under their breath or looking askance or displeasing the master in any kind of way. Or, God forbid that one should look at a white woman or be thought to look at a white woman or disrespect, a white person. So in this new freedom that they were experiencing, they were determined that they were going to speak their truth without fear or favor. They didn't care if Black folks liked what they were saying. They didn't care if white folks liked what they were saying. They were going to speak truth to power.
Okay. When I think about speaking truth to power, there's so many of us, even today, that have the underlying fear that if they say something, or if they should do something, or if they should, be authentic, their authentic self, that they will somehow get in trouble. And there's this underlying fear, and I have seen this, and I've heard about this for, it doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the sex. It doesn't matter where you come from. I've heard people throughout my life saying, I would do this, but I am afraid. What are people afraid of?
Oh, you know what, Dr. E, you nailed it. I was just recently in a city meeting as a commissioner, and I was just struck that there were people there that were afraid to go against another seemingly more powerful, prestigious, what have you, person. And you know what? Like, so sad. We are so crippled when we allow ourselves to shrink before other people. And that's what that is, when we cannot speak truth to power or truth to anyone. We are allowing the most authentic and creative and best of ourselves to shrink. And we have to be audacious enough to decide, you know what, I am as important as every single person sitting at this table. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their degree is, their nationality, their income, their whatever it is. I am just as valuable. And when people get to that place, you don't care who walks in the room. You don't care who sits at the table, but it is a learned behavior.
Okay, so how do we learn this behavior, Queen V? Because so often, just say you have a job and you fear losing your job because you've heard about these whistleblowing cases where someone tries to tell the truth and they're actually reading a policy that says, see something, say something, and you're following a policy. You see something, you say something, and the next thing you know, your job is on the line because you spoke the truth and you thought that you would be in a safe place, but you're not. And then other people outside of that situation they will look and see, saying, wait a minute, that person spoke truth to power. That person followed policy and procedure, but look at what's happening to that person now. That person has lost their job, or that person's getting ridiculed. How can we get past the fear of losing a job, or the fear of people saying, well, if you do this, then people are going to think less of you, or you're going to get ridiculed, or what? How do we get past that?
I don't know that we get past the fear as much as we overwhelm the fear. And that happens when we are audacious enough to believe in who we are. I remember an incident I had in my own career where a nurse manager at this particular agency just disrespected me loudly and in front of a group of nurses. That was just ridiculous. And before I knew it, I responded so quickly and shut her down that everybody behind her was laughing, really at her. But it did. It cost me my job, but it did not cost me my self-respect. And when I left there, I knew, the Lord opened that door. I would have another door open, and probably I had another position before I left the building. But the point is, we have to decide in and of ourselves that we are valuable enough not to put our dignity and our self-respect up for sale. And when we do that, we get the power to stand.
That's deep. That's really deep. As you were speaking, I thought about a similar situation that I had in my career that cost me a job. It actually cost me a job, but I was happy because I'll tell you, when you do something that's inconsistent or incongruent with your belief system, and you sell your soul to the devil, or you sell your soul to somebody that really could care less about you, then you will have to live with that for the rest of your life. And having a daughter, and I've always told my daughter, is that you always have to do the right thing, and it might cost you to do the right thing. And that means, when I say cost you, hey, you might lose a job, you might lose something material behind it, but you'll never lose your dignity, you'll never lose your respect, and then you can look back and say, you know what, I'm glad I did it my way. I'll tell you, the number one thing when I think about people that will put something in front of me to get me to sell out, I think about my mother. I think about someone that never, ever sold out. I think about a person that had a really tough time in her life growing up, but she loved me enough to teach me to always do the right thing no matter what. And dignity and respect that I have for myself, self-dignity and respect, is not for sale. So I think that's probably a good point, is because sometimes, Queen V, we can get so caught up into what other people think that we end up going down another path. And I think about the people during the Harlem Renaissance, and I think about their greatness, and I think about maybe a lot of negativity that they had to go through, but they left a legacy for us, Queen V, that we could point back in history and say, if it were not for them, there would not be a path maybe for others. So let's talk a little bit more about the Harlem Renaissance and why it's so important for us to think about how we need to collaborate and not sell ourselves just because we run into some difficulties.
Well, I think one thing that was so powerful about the Harlem Renaissance is that they embraced who they were. Up to that point, African Americans, we at that point, we didn't have Essence magazines, we didn't have BET on television. We rarely saw images that were positive of ourselves in the media. Even when we were children, you didn't see Black folks on TV for a long, long time. I remember Bill Cosby was one of the earliest ones. Diane Carroll was early on, but in our very, very young childhood, Leave It to Beaver, all those other shows, no shame to them, but they weren't showing Black folks.
Right.
But, then finally, as we got older, I guess they invented Black folks and they were able to show us. But way back with the Harlem Renaissance, they decided that they were going to embrace their culture, embrace the beauty and the magnificence, the brilliance of who we are as a people. And they were going to do that without fear or favor. They were not going to be shamed. They were not going to be denied. We have so many writers, performers, everything that are linked to the Harlem Renaissance, because as each one became great, they gave the other one next to them courage and conviction, confidence, right, that they could be great too. And that's why what we are doing with Audacious to Believe is so important. We are imparting confidence, courage, the ability to overtake fear and still do things to our viewing audience.
Well, Queen V, it's really interesting. It's because as we know and we've talked about before, we've been friends for 60 years. And when we think about why and how we got to where we are today, it goes back to the foundation. And the foundation from which we come from our belief in God, our belief in ourselves, and that early teaching and training and developing that still lies within me. I just think about that. And we're blessed to have that. But what about people that don't have the foundational belief system in themselves? There are people out there that do not have the family or friends that can encourage them to keep plowing forward, to keep moving forward, to keep believing in themselves. Let's try to unpack that a little bit.
You know, I love that you mentioned that, Dr. E, because, you know, I'm a researcher and I love researching content and stories, and I have my whole entire life love researching the autobiographies of others. But there is really an unusual fact, and that is the people that have accomplished the most have had the most obstacles. It's not usually like the children, say, of the Gettys or this or that or the other family name, the DuPonts, the Mellons, not their children that succeed, but it may be a child that was dropped off at a doorstep, that was orphaned, you know, that turns around and does magnificent things. Like Carnegie had rough childhood growing up, but dreamed of being a philanthropist. And through that magnanimity, he was able to bless generations. We still have libraries because of what Carnegie established. I think the Harlem Renaissance was the same way. You know, people are not limited by the past. We are only limited by our imagination and our willingness to work for it.
I hear you. You know, it's so interesting that you're mentioning this, is because I know that when we were young, we didn't have a lot of toys. We had each other, and we allowed our imagination to carry us through so many different phases in our lives. And I think about that hunger. I used to walk around as a teenager wondering, I wonder how I can get enough money to buy a car. I mean, nobody gave me a car, but it made me wonder, well, how can I do it? Oh, if I get a job. Oh, if I save my money. Oh, if I do this, and oh, if I do that. And so just knowing that there is a path, no matter where you come from, you can succeed no matter what. You do not have to be from a family of wealth. I just say this: if you have the hunger in you, if there is something in you that really, you know, just it's like you can't wait to just, you know, do something or whatever it is. Just listen to your spirit. That hunger in you can motivate you to keep climbing, keep doing, and not to be fearful of getting out there. A part of success is failure. I mean, if you don't, when I first learned how to ride a bike, do you think I just got on a bicycle and just started riding and didn't fall? I fell, I don't know how many times. And I get right back up on that bike, and then I go a little bit, you know, farther down the street or whatever it is, and then I fall again. I get back up and keep going. Or like a baby that's trying to learn how to walk. They just don't say one day, okay, I'm just going to walk and I can walk like an adult. Well, they have to first kind of climb up on somebody's leg or the table or chair or whatever it is, or be propped up, and they have to have somebody next to them to get them going or motivated, where they can actually start walking. And I think that that's true when it comes to success, or when it comes to moving forward. Unpack that a little bit, Queen V.
Well, you know, it's so interesting that you said that it related it to babies, you know, which we both love. I just love babies. But I was listening to a story today, in fact, and it was talking about during World War II, I believe it was, with the Nazi invasion and whatnot, that they had taken the babies that were orphaned and they put them in an orphanage where all their needs were met. They were fed, they were clothed. They just did not hold and nurture these babies because they were without their mothers, their natural nurturers. And these children developed what they call still today failure to thrive. It wasn't anything physical. It was an emotional lack that they needed to thrive. And everybody needs that. Does everybody get that? Absolutely not. But every human being that is an adult, I know children don't have so much control, but every adult human being that is normally functioning has the ability to change their environment, change their friends, change their status. We are not trees, Dr. E. We are not stuck. We can change, we can learn, we can reinvent ourselves at any juncture. That's what's so important about faith in God. The faith in God, God will not allow to remain the thing we dream of. He puts in our spirits to dream, to do more, to be more, to have more.
Well, it's interesting that you're mentioning that, is because we can want more and we can dream more, but to get unstuck, sometimes just that little seed of doubt keeps us stuck where we are. But how do we get past that seed of doubt? Because I know there's someone listening right now that want to make a change, but they don't know how to make the change because of that one thing. Well, what if that doesn't work? What if this? What if that? Talk about that, Queen V.
It reminds me of this quote that I love so much. And the quote goes, well, what if I, try and fail? What if I try and fall? Well, the end of that quote is, what if I fly? What if I fly? What if it works? If we can get our mindset into the not, well, what if this happens? Well, and think of every single horrible thing that could happen. Probably at the end of that is not that you would die, right? Think of, what if I fly? And generally, I find that people are stuck at the first step, on a treadmill. And you know this because you work out. It's getting to the treadmill. Once you make that first step, you're going. You've got your rhythm. You've got your gait. Your music is going. And you think, wow, this isn't so bad. I kind of enjoyed this. It's the same thing with life. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. If we can get the courage to just take the first step, forget about the million gazillion steps in the process. Start with one. And then the next day, go to another one. And the more you start, the more momentum you gain. And you are on that treadmill, just going, right? Just working it out.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you on that. Well, Queen V, I think about the Harlem Renaissance, and then I'm going to fast forward to today. I think about the beauty of Amanda Gorman and this young, brilliant woman that reached back in the past. She brought everything forward, and then this young woman that had the insights to be able to share with millions and millions of people the beauty of today, but not forgetting about the past, but how we have to change who we are and how the hearts of people need to be re-examined. It's because what's happened in the past, the racism and all this other stuff, and you name it, is already there. We have to understand that that's a part of where we are today. But let's talk about Amanda. It's because I think about Harlem Renaissance and her face just fits in that era. But she's today's woman, today's woman that really brings flavor to where we are. So let's talk about her.
Oh, I love Amanda Gorman. Oh my gosh, what an awesome, incredible young woman. And I read a lot of her history. I believe she's from the Los Angeles area, just phenomenal Harvard graduate, but she didn't start there. And that's what we talk about with the one step. We don't start there. And I remembered reading about her auditioning for a role in The Lion King. And, you could just see her with her voice and the gravitas of her persona doing that. But guess what? You talk about failure. She didn't make it, but she was encouraged to keep on in her journey. That, what? We're not going to make every bat that we go after. We're not going to hit every ball out the gate, but if we just keep going forward. And I love Amanda Gorman so much that I referenced her in the foreword to your book,
Okay.
Resilience, because I thought she was the perfect example of being the youngest poet laureate of the United States and being this little teeny young African American girl with all of this power in her, all of this creativity and all of this brilliance. But even with all of that, she still had to experience rejection. She still had to experience failure. She still had to learn. She still had to work her way through. People think that because they saw her, that all of a sudden she just was an overnight success, but she wasn't. She had been toiling the soil. She had been sowing. She had been serving. She had been learning. She had been developing her craft to the point that she could stand up in the full authority of her queenliness with that crown on her head,
Right.
you know, at Joe Biden's inauguration and just blow the world away. But it was a process. So can you speak to that process, Dr. E?
Yeah, well, you know, behind every performance that we as spectators get to see, we never think about what happens behind closed doors as far as preparation. And the preparation is where all the work happens. It's not the performance per se, but getting there. And when you talked about Amanda Gorman not being able to succeed in other areas, that's a part of the preparation. When she had the no, saying, well, no, you're not going to be, you know, we're not going to select you to be a part of the Lions King team. God has something greater for her, much greater. Imagine, had she gotten the Lions King part, she probably may not have gotten to speak at the inauguration of our president of the United States. And so now she has a world view. People see her from around the world, nations on top of nations. And if she were on, just say in New York, on what is that, Broadway or whatever, she probably would have been more limited. So I say that to say this, is that when we think in terms of people, it could be an athlete, it can be someone, a musician or whatever it is. They just don't get out there and then perform, and we don't have the opportunity to know that there's a lot of sweat, tears and everything else comes with being great. And the number one thing we have to let everybody know, yes, there's going to be rejection. Yes, there's going to be, pillow-soaked tears is what you called it in the resilience book, the tears at night and wondering, well, why am I doing this? And questioning, how come I'm doing that? And wondering, why is it so difficult and hard? But you gotta keep pressing forward. And by the time the world sees us, then we look pretty darn good, but they don't really know the true story behind it unless we let them know. And so, yeah, there's a lot of work that go behind so many great people. We have to be able to see. I remember reading about one of our, there's a boxer that, he was, what's his name? I can't even think of his name, but I can see it. When he said, I work really, really hard early in the morning. I'm running, I'm doing all these different things as far as preparation for a fight. And I'm doing all the exercises and everything else. And by the time I get into the ring, people see the win, but they don't really understand or know what it took to get to the win. They only see the victory. And if those people were cheering me on as I'm preparing for the fight, that would even be more wonderful. It's because when you're preparing for something great, Queen V, oftentimes you're alone. And so you have to really, have the power and the right attitude and the right belief to keep going, because it's easy to quit when you're by yourself. It's easy for everybody else to clap when they can see the performance. But what about the grind of the work when you're out there by yourself and you're burning that midnight oil? So I say that to say this, is that we have to keep working hard no matter what. And we have to keep believing in ourselves enough that we can get through the midnight hours, and we can keep working by ourselves to get to where we are right now.
Absolutely. I think that most great achievement, like there is that poem by Henry Longfellow, I believe, that talks about, how he was working while others were sleeping. And that generally is the road to success. Like you referenced Muhammad Ali. He always said, the fight is won at 4 a.m. in the morning. It's not won under the lights.
Yes.
It's not ever really won under the light. People see our preparation. And because when you are fully prepared and you've done all, you've made the mistakes and you've fallen down and gotten back up and relearned and retweaked and reinvented, restarted, all the things that you have to do to be a success, people look at you and they think, oh, that's easy. I could do that, because you make it look easy, but it's not easy, right? It's like a surgeon that really is meticulous and knows their job. And a chef, great chefs have all of their utensils out, and I watch them on so many cooking shows. And when they chop up that celery and whatnot, it looks like it's the easiest thing in the world. I'm like, well, surely I can do that. I cut myself 10 times, and it is not as easy as it looks. But that is where we gain confidence. We gain confidence through competence. Mm-hmm. When we become competent, when we fall and get back up, just like little babies, stronger. And somewhere in life, Dr. E, as we get older, that is shamed out of us. That is ridiculed out of us. Oh, look at you. You can't even climb the whole monkey bar. Get down. That we learn to shrink. But the great, audacious ones that we are speaking to are learning not to shrink. Everybody is going to fail. You just don't see their bloopers. You don't see the blooper reels. You haven't seen ours yet. We'll have to show them one day.
Okay. Well,
but everybody has their blooper reels.
Okay, with that, Queen V, you have summed it up, and I want to us now to just let our audience know, just keep going, keep doing what you got to do to achieve the greatness that you need to achieve. So, Vanita, let's wrap it up and let's tell our audience how they can find us next time.
We can be found at queenvandre.com. We are on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Instagram, and Facebook. So please go to our platforms, like, share, and subscribe. Then that way you can catch all of our episodes on the audacity to believe, A to B. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye everybody.
We've got audacity to believe, yeah. We've got audacity to believe.